My name is Emily Carter, and if you had told me a few years ago that a single family dinner would change the way I saw my marriage, my future, and even myself, I would have laughed at you. But that's exactly what happened. That Sunday dinner at my mother-in-law's house wasn't just uncomfortable, it was the spark that lit a firestorm I never could have imagined. Daniel, my husband, drove us there in silence, his hand gripping the wheel tighter than usual. Maybe he sensed what was coming, or maybe, as I would later come to realize, he already knew what games his mother liked to play, and he had simply learned to ignore them. I, on the other hand, was still new to the rules of this cruel game, and that night, I was about to be schooled in the harshest way. The first sign came as soon as we walked in. Her mother greeted him with open arms, kissed his cheek, and showered him with warmth. Then her eyes shifted to me, and all I got was a flat, "Emily." No hug, no smile, just my name, as though I were an unwelcomed guest instead of her son's wife. Her house was as immaculate as ever. Gleaming hardwood floors, perfectly polished chandeliers, and walls lined with framed photos of Daniel, his siblings, and their childhood memories. Not a single photo of me and Daniel together. 3 years of marriage, countless family events, holidays, and yet it was as though I didn't exist. That detail, which I used to brush off as forgetfulness, struck me hard that night. I felt invisible before the dinner even began. The living room buzzed with chatter as relatives trickled in, cousins greeting each other warmly, sisters-in-law exchanging compliments about outfits, children running around underfoot. I sat at Daniel's side, trying to blend in, smiling politely when anyone addressed me, but mostly ignored as the conversations carried on without me. I had never truly felt at home in this family, but that night the distance seemed even sharper. When dinner was announced, we all moved into the grand dining room. The table was set like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Polished silverware, wine glasses glimmering under candlelight, folded napkins shaped into swans, and in the center, platters of steak, still sizzling, their aroma filling the room with mouth-watering promise. My stomach growled, but nerves tightened it into knots. My mother-in-law took her place at the head of the table, holding court like a queen about to feed her subjects. She carved the steaks herself, serving them one by one, Daniel first, of course, with a warm smile. His brothers next, each plate accompanied by her affectionate comments. Their wives greeted with small talk as she set their portions down. Even the cousins received generous helpings, garnished with roasted vegetables and garlic bread. And then her eyes slid past me. She didn't pause, didn't ask, didn't even acknowledge that I was sitting there. She plated food for Miranda, Daniel's sister, set it down, and then, with an air of finality, sat down herself. Every place at the table was filled with steaming plates of food, except mine. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she had simply overlooked me in the chaos. I waited, expecting her to notice, to laugh it off, to hurry back to the kitchen and fix it. But as seconds ticked by, I realized she wasn't going to. She hadn't forgotten me. She had skipped me. The sound of knives and forks cutting into steak filled the silence that stretched around me. Conversations picked back up. Laughter echoed. No one, not Daniel, not his siblings, not even the cousins, said a word. No one acknowledged that I was sitting at a beautifully set place, staring at an empty plate while everyone else ate. I felt my face burn. My hands trembled under the cable. My throat tightened, and I fought back the tears that threatened to spill. My pride screamed at me not to show weakness, not to give her the satisfaction. But the humiliation was suffocating. I glanced at Daniel, silently begging him to notice, to say something. But he didn't. He was busy cutting into his steak, chewing, laughing at something his brother said. My husband, the man who promised to stand beside me, couldn't even look at me. I considered speaking up myself. My lips parted, but the words refused to come out. What would I even say? That her mother had deliberately excluded me? that I was sitting there like a child being punished. My fear of causing a scene, of being labeled the dramatic wife, held me back. When I reached for the breadbasket, desperate to have at least something to eat, Miranda snatched it up before I could touch it, laughing as she tore off the last piece. She didn't even look at me. My chest hollowed out with disbelief. Was this really happening? Was everyone just going to pretend not to see? Then came dessert. Cheesecake, rich and creamy, drizzled with caramel and chocolate. She served it with a flourish, placing slices on plates, sliding them in front of each family member. The sweet scent filled the air, almost taunting me. And again, she skipped me. My spot remained empty. When I looked up, I caught her eyes on me. Cold, calculating, and then the faintest curl at the corner of her lips. Satisfaction. That's when it hit me, like a punch to the gut. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. A message. A declaration of war. My chest heaved with a storm of emotions. Anger, shame, disbelief, betrayal. I wanted to shout, to slam my hands on the table and demand why she was doing this to me. But I froze. My voice died in my throat. I sat there, empty plate in front of me, while laughter and clinking forks filled the air.
The morning after that dinner, I woke up with the bitter taste of humiliation still lingering in my mouth. I had barely eaten the night before, and yet it wasn't hunger that gnawed at me. It was the memory of those cold eyes, that smirk of satisfaction on my mother-in-law's face. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Daniel asleep beside me, and I asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. Why does she hate me so much? It wasn't as if I'd wronged her. I had tried, truly tried to be the dutiful daughter-in-law. I brought gifts on birthdays, helped clean up after dinners, remembered anniversaries. I never raised my voice, never spoke out of turn, never gave her reason to see me as anything other than respectful. And yet, she had never warmed to me. From the very beginning, she treated me like a trespasser in her family, someone who had slipped past the gatekeepers and taken the place that wasn't rightfully mine. As I made coffee in the kitchen that morning, I thought back to when Daniel first introduced me to her. I had been so nervous, clutching his hand as he led me into that same immaculate house. She had smiled then, but it hadn't reached her eyes. Her hug was perfunctory, her questions polite but loaded. Where are you from? What does your family do? Subtle, probing, as though she were measuring me against some invisible checklist. And though Daniel had assured me she just needed time, 3 years had passed and nothing had changed. If anything, it had gotten worse. Daniel shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, stretching like nothing had happened the night before. I studied him, waiting, hoping for him to say something, to acknowledge what had happened, to defend me. But he didn't. He just asked if we had any milk left. Finally, I couldn't hold it in. Daniel, I said, my voice sharper than I intended, did you notice what happened last night? He paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? I stared at him in disbelief. Are you seriously going to pretend you didn't see it? Your mother didn't serve me. Not dinner, not dessert, nothing. I sat there the whole time with an empty plate. His brow furrowed, as though he were trying to recall. I guess I didn't notice, he said slowly. I was talking with Mark about the new project. Maybe she just forgot. Forgot? My voice cracked with frustration. Daniel, everyone else had a plate. Everyone. She looked right at me and moved on. That wasn't forgetting. That was deliberate. He sighed, pushing his spoon into his cereal. You're reading too much into it. Mom can be particular. Maybe she was distracted. Distracted, I repeated, my hands trembling. Daniel, she looked at me. She wanted me to feel humiliated. And the worst part is, you sat there and said nothing. His shoulders tensed. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene at the table? Embarrass everyone? I stared at him, stunned by his indifference. You were supposed to stand up for me, to at least acknowledge it. Instead, you ignored me, just like she wanted. For a moment, his mask slipped. Guilt flickered across his face, but then it hardened into something else, defensiveness. Emily, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. She's my mother. She doesn't hate you. You just overthink things. Overthink. That word cut deeper than he realized. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. So it's my imagination? The empty plate, the cheesecake, none of that happened? I didn't say that, he muttered. I'm just saying maybe you should let it go. Let it go. As if it were that simple. As if being deliberately humiliated in front of a table full of people could be brushed aside like a spilled glass of wine. But I knew arguing further would get me nowhere. So I nodded silently, even as my insides boiled. If Daniel wasn't going to stand up for me, then I'd have to find answers myself. Over the next week, I began to notice things I had previously overlooked. Small details, subtle clues. The way my mother-in-law always excluded me from family group chats, yet sent messages to everyone else. The way she planned outings with Daniel and his siblings, but never extended the invitation to me. The way she spoke about me to others, as if I weren't in the room. But the strangest detail of all came one afternoon when I stopped by Daniel's office to drop off lunch. His secretary smiled warmly, chatting with me as I waited. On her desk, I noticed a framed photo of her and her mother at a company dinner. Something about it struck me. The warmth in their smiles, the closeness, the unspoken bond. It was the very opposite of what I had with my mother-in-law. Later that night, unable to sleep, I went through old conversations with Daniel in my mind. Memories of things he'd said, comments he'd made. And then it hit me. His mother had always been possessive of him, overly so, as if no woman could ever be good enough, as if she believed Daniel belonged to her, not me. I began to suspect that her hatred of me wasn't about me at all. It was about control, about power, about not wanting to let go of her son. But the more I thought about it, the more another possibility crept into my mind, a darker one. What if it wasn't just about control? What if there was something deeper, something she was hiding from me, some reason she didn't want me at the table, some secret she didn't want me to uncover? That suspicion grew stronger the following weekend. Daniel's brother Mark had invited us over for a casual barbecue. It was relaxed, nothing like the formal dinners their mother hosted. People laughed freely, children played in the yard, and for once I felt almost included. Mark's wife, Claire, was kind, chatting with me about work and hobbies. But then, as we stood by the grill, she lowered her voice and said something that made my blood run cold. I don't know how you do it, she whispered, glancing towards the house. Living with her disapproval hanging over you all the time, I don't think I could handle it. My heart skipped. Meaning Mom? Claire gave a small, tight smile. She's always been that way, territorial, possessive. But with you, it's different. I don't think it's just about being protective of Daniel. There's more to it. What do you mean? I pressed, my pulse quickening. But before she could answer, Mark called for her, and she walked away, leaving me with more questions than ever. More to it. What more could there be? That night, as I lay in bed beside Daniel, I couldn't stop replaying Claire's words. There's more to it. My mind raced with possibilities. Old grudges? A secret from the past? Something about my family or about me that his mother couldn't accept? Or was it something about Daniel himself? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing for certain. My mother-in-law wasn't just being cruel for the sake of cruelty. She had a reason, a motive, and until I uncovered it, she would keep winning. So I made a silent vow that night. I would dig, I would watch, I would listen, and I would find out the truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. Because one thing was clear. The dinner table betrayal was only the beginning. The real battle was still to come.
The more I thought about Claire's words, "there's more to it," the more restless I became. It was like she had pulled back a curtain just enough to show me there was something hidden, something sinister, but not enough to let me see what it truly was. And that kind of half-truth gnawed at me worse than silence. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to every glance, every comment, every awkward pause in conversation whenever I entered a room. And slowly, a picture began to form. Not just of a mother-in-law who disliked me, but of a family divided. It started small. Miranda, Daniel's sister, called one afternoon while he was at work. Her voice was unusually soft, hesitant. "Emily, I just wanted to, I don't know, apologize." "Apologize? For what?" "For the dinner, the other night. I should have said something. I saw what Mom did, and I froze. I didn't want to cause a fight." Her words stunned me. For weeks I'd felt like I was losing my mind, like maybe I'd imagined the coldness of that night. But here was Miranda, admitting she had seen it too. That validation was like oxygen after suffocating. "Thank you for saying that," I whispered. "It means more than you know." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Look, Mom has always been controlling, but lately it feels worse. I think she's hiding something, and she's taking it out on you." "What do you mean, hiding something?" "I don't know," Miranda admitted, "but she's been secretive. She has these locked drawers in her study. She takes phone calls late at night. I've overheard her talking about things she cuts off when anyone walks in. It's like she's afraid of being found out." A chill spread through me. My mother-in-law wasn't just a cruel woman with a grudge. She was a woman with secrets, and somehow I was entangled in them. Miranda swore me to secrecy, and I agreed, but now I had more questions than answers. If even her own daughter suspected her of hiding something, what could it possibly be? And why did her hatred of me seem to be tied to it? One evening not long after, Daniel and I were invited again to his mother's house. I almost refused, but part of me needed to go back, needed to see her, to watch her, to maybe catch a glimpse of the truth beneath her mask. The atmosphere was different this time. Tense. His brothers sat stiffly, barely speaking. Clara kept her eyes lowered, her hands fidgeting with her napkin. Even the cousins seemed quieter, subdued. The usual boisterous laughter was gone, replaced by something heavy and unspoken. I watched my mother-in-law closely. She moved with her usual grace, serving food, making polite conversation, but there was something in her eyes, a sharpness, a wariness, like a predator on edge. Every time I looked her way, she quickly looked elsewhere. Dinner passed without incident, but the silence spoke volumes. It was as if the whole family knew something I didn't, as if I was the only one still in the dark. Afterward, while everyone lingered in the living room, I excused myself and slipped down the hall. My heart pounded as I crept toward her study. The door was closed, but I could hear faint voices from inside. I pressed my ear to the wood, straining to catch the words. "She can't know. Not yet. If Daniel tells her..." The sound of footsteps made me jump back just as the door opened. My mother-in-law stood there, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. "Looking for something?" she asked, her tone icy. I forced a smile. Just the restroom. Her gaze lingered on me for a long, tense moment before she finally stepped aside. It's the other way. I hurried off, my heart racing. She knew I'd been listening, and now I was sure of it. There was something she didn't want me to find out. That night, as Daniel and I drove home, I debated telling him what I'd overheard, but then I looked at him, at his tired eyes and the way he gripped the steering wheel, and fear stopped me. What if he already knew? What if he was keeping the same secret? The divide in the family grew clearer in the weeks that followed. Miranda began texting me privately, little fragments of information. She burned old letters last night. She keeps a locked box in her closet. She's been meeting with someone I don't recognize. Each message was another piece of the puzzle, but the picture was still incomplete. Meanwhile, Daniel grew more distant. Whenever I brought up his mother, he shut down, dismissing my concerns or changing the subject. The more I pressed, the colder he became. It was like there was a wall between us, built brick by brick out of secrets and silence. Then came the night when everything cracked open. We were at another family gathering, this time at Mark and Claire's house. The tension was unbearable. Everyone speaking in half sentences, avoiding certain topics. Finally, after a few too many glasses of wine, Mark slammed his glass down and said, "Enough! We can't keep pretending." The room went silent. My mother-in-law's eyes flashed with warning, but Mark pressed on. "She deserves to know. Emily's not the enemy here. She's family, and she has a right to the truth." My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the rest. Claire reached for his arm, whispering for him to stop, but the dam had already broken. Miranda's eyes darted to me, full of guilt and fear. "What truth?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What are you all hiding from me?" No one answered. The silence stretched until it felt like it would crush me. My mother-in-law's face was pale with fury, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, she stood, her voice sharp as a blade. "That's enough. This discussion is over." But it wasn't over. Not for me. That night, lying awake beside Daniel, I realized something irreversible had happened. The family was divided between those who wanted the truth hidden and those who wanted it revealed. And I was caught in the middle, blindfolded, forced to stumble through their secrets. I didn't know yet what the truth was, but I knew one thing. It was only a matter of time before it came out, and when it did, it would tear this family apart. The night of the final dinner is burned into my memory like a scar. By then, I was already numb to the cold stares, the half smiles, the subtle ways my mother-in-law made me feel like I didn't belong. But I wasn't numb to the truth anymore. I had uncovered it, piece by piece, like pulling threads from a tightly woven rug until the whole thing began to unravel. I remember setting foot inside her grand dining room that evening. The table gleamed, polished within an inch of its life, with silverware laid out like weapons. Candles flickered low, shadows dancing along the walls as if the house itself knew what was about to happen. My heart pounded, but not from fear anymore. This time, it was from resolve. She looked at me when I entered, her eyes narrowing just slightly, a predator sensing that her prey had grown teeth. And for the first time, I didn't look away. I walked straight to my seat, not the one she usually left empty, but one right across from her. My husband hesitated, caught between the tension, but he followed silently. Dinner began the same way as always. Steaks, wine, laughter that sounded rehearsed, but beneath it was a crackling silence, a knowing. They didn't know what I had discovered, but they could feel something coming. My mother-in-law tried to keep her smile fixed, but I could see her fingers tapping against her glass. She was nervous, and that was when I knew it was time. I stood, my chair scraping against the wood floor, and all eyes turned to me. My voice didn't shake. Before we eat, I think it's time the truth comes out. My husband reached for my hand, whispering, "Emily, maybe this isn't the right time." "It's exactly the right time," I said firmly. My eyes locked on her mother's. Because this family has been playing a cruel game with me, and it ends tonight. Gasps rippled around the table. His brothers leaned forward. His sister's fork froze midway to her mouth. My mother-in-law's smile faltered for the first time. I told them everything. How I had noticed the patterns, the way I was excluded at dinners, the way conversations would fall silent when I entered the room, the secretive exchanges of glances, how I found the letters tucked away in a drawer, proof of the resentment she carried toward me, how she had whispered lies about me to the rest of the family, sowing seeds of doubt and division. And then, the deepest cut of all, the truth that she had never wanted me there because she reminded her of something she could never control, that her son had chosen me, a woman she didn't approve of, over her. Every slight, every humiliation, every missing plate of food had been her way of punishing me for daring to love him. The room fell into stunned silence. My husband's face went pale. His siblings shifted uncomfortably, torn between loyalty to their mother and the undeniable evidence I laid bare. Finally, I turned to my husband. "You knew some of it, didn't you? You saw how she treated me, but you let it happen because it was easier to keep the peace." His eyes brimmed with guilt, and for the first time, he couldn't deny it. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother-in-law finally spoke, her voice low but sharp. "You don't belong in this family, Emily. You never have, and no dramatic speech is going to change that." I smiled, but it wasn't out of kindness. It was the smile of someone who had survived. "You're wrong. I do belong, because being part of a family isn't about who sits at the head of the table. It's about love, respect, and truth. And if those things don't exist here, then maybe this isn't a family worth clinging to." I pushed back my chair and stood tall. My husband rose too, finally, his voice breaking the tension. "Enough, Mom. She's my wife. I should have defended her long ago, and I didn't. But that ends tonight." The look on her face was one I'll never forget. Anger mixed with fear, as though she realized her control was slipping away. The rest of the family sat in silence. The illusion shattered. There was no going back. That night, I walked out of her house with my head held high, my husband's hand in mine. It wasn't the neat, happy ending I once imagined. Families don't heal overnight, and wounds like those run deep. But it was a turning point, a moment where I stopped being the outsider and became the woman who stood her ground. And maybe, just maybe, that was the family's real test all along. Not whether I could fit into their world, but whether I could find the strength to stand up against it. Because sometimes the most powerful seat at the table is the one you take for yourself.